by work with the crystallographer, and by let's begin, the interference patterns that you're seeing, you can see that there are, the big lines that you're seeing are completely generated by your own brain. There are very fine white lines and then very fine black lines, but the movement and the thicker line that you're seeing is completely generated by your own brain, and it's doing that by taking where the two lines cross, and instead of seeing all the way to the detail of the cross, it's blurring up and down. So it's expanding. So that's how you're getting that. That's how you're getting amplified illusion of movement, and of so that's where the extra line is being generated in your brain completely. So everybody will see that line at different distances in different ways. And so if you look at this pattern here, for example, from over here, you might see some really thick lines.
Yes.
If let's come forward a bit, and some of you will see it pop into a finer line a bit closer. As you come closer, you might see you'll see the next layer of lines at the end.
Everybody's got processing the faces and the colours.
Oh, yes. It's something called the vase.
It's like that one that I did when I was doing my undergraduate with negative space.
It's the vase space illusion, absolutely. So you can actually put a frequency in somebody's brain and trigger a change from a vase to a face. So these are all ways of using interference patterns to create that illusion of movement. And when you talk to people who work in crystallography, for example, when they're analysing the way that light travels through a molecule or through an atom, they will analyse that movement and give it a certain name. And so these are inspired by the movements that crystallographers notice. There are 17 different types of movement or rhythm, ways of tiling space in the plane. And these are just 4 of them. And the way they normally, so as you move, you'll see that they have very subtly different rhythms or movements. And so these are all, the one with the dots is actually the same rhythm or pattern of movement that Dorothy Hodgkin spotted in photo 51 to notice DNA. So it's a twofold rotation. Now I've used the ducks. The ducks is the way that in traditional textbooks use the ducks instead of an illusion pattern, obviously, because you can see the beak and the tail. It's very easy to see which way is up and down. So you can see the one there on the top left is a simple repeat pattern, and it's the same as the one on the far left over there. It's called a P1. So these are just different ways of expressing the same idea. But this one is obviously crystallographers aren't going to do that. But it was part of an exhibition at Somerset House for the Medical Research Council Centenary on ways that you can use science. So these are ways of using experience patterns, and I'll get out some bits for you to have a play. What I then did, just so that you understand what's happening here, is that to create that illusion in 3 dimensions, because the doctorate was all about perception of space, what I needed to do was to create your brain. And one of the reasons why it is noticing that, creating that pattern, is that it needs to locate rhythm. It notices regularity, and then it spots differences. If you see what I'm saying. So, in order to create a solid illusion, you need regularity. It needs to lock on to a pattern. So, I wanted to create patterns inside glass that were absolutely regular, and then as the the shape of the glass expanded or reduced the apparent scale, you would think that something was closer or further away. And actually, this is probably a better place to look at it. As you move around this one, you'll see that the dots seem to get bigger and smaller. And that's because the dots are all the same size, but it's the curvature of the glass which is changing. So in order to get that perfect regularity, what I did there was to get sausage glass, or ask sausage glass, and sand glass, a very specific detailed pattern of the surface of the glass. Take it back to the glass blower and dip it into hot glass, and where the sandblast pattern was trapped a bubble in exactly where I wanted it to be. So it's
That's really hard to do because I've done a bit of glass blowing.
Yeah.
And it was tricky.
It was there were only 2 glass ones I ever found that could do it perfectly. So I dip it once, and then let that cool down, and then we dipped it again and again. So I did that 5 times to create this particular, and then I carved it by hand to create the curvature that I wanted. So it took a couple of months actually, and this is the number of that failed is not really.
How do you get the dots so accurate?
Well, that's because I laser cut sticky back plastic basically. So I used that I knew with trial and error I worked out the perfect size of dot that would hold while I sandblasted long enough to get a decent bit in the glass. Because when you dip into glass, if you've got the temperature correct and everything perfect, the glass is like honey. Have you ever used a honey wand and you can see So the glass traps a bubble into an imperfection on the surface of the glass. So I've trial and error for a while, worked out exactly the size of hole that I needed in order to create the perfect dot. So this was, so that it took a while. The first experiments actually were using a plate, because I thought, well, I could get a sandblast, get a plate, sandblast a pattern onto that, and then wrap that around a piece of glass, and that would trap my bubbles very happily. The problem was that I could only do that once. Once I wanted to put the next plate on, I couldn't locate the bubbles on top of each other correctly. Mm-hmm. The only way to get this perfect concentric relationship was to do this sort of concentric sausage system. So this is one of the only ones that work with the plate. But you can see you get a lovely net.
Yeah, that's a beautiful shape. It's kind of like showing kind of geo rocks. It's like
exactly. Yeah. But so you can see the you can see the plate. And what I also love is if you look at down here, you get a lovely sort of that kind of sparkling rain of dots down here. So you get that weird optical illusion happening. But I couldn't get it. I couldn't get the next plate on it, so I couldn't get the relationship. So this one, I wanted to make something which is a bit where the bubbles were bigger, and actually I think it's no longer really hasn't got that quiet containment of the other one. But with this one, what I started to do was make much bigger bubbles and play with the end, but also add a mineral. I would rub iron ore into the bubbles, a bit like etching, if a mineral is ever etched. To create something which trapped more. It actually expanded, and you can see the ore, you can see the minerals trapped in the back end of the bubble. And the stripes are made by a transfer, water slide transfer. If it was, yes. So these are screen printed using ceramic materials onto a water slide, so it was an adaptation of the kinds of transfers that they use on mugs and things. So I was working with this crystallographer and looking at patterns and shapes. So I created a series of platonic solids for the Jerwood Arts Prize, so I was able to make those. I was thinking fun to do that, and then started it was called essential symmetries, because his idea was that every shape, every element or everything in nature has a fundamental shape, and that relates. So a cube is the earth, and a pyramid is fire. So there's a balancing relationship for all of them. Yes, there is. So this is a truncated object. The next generation of maths, which are looking at essential mathematics, was an Archimedean solid. So they mix 2 solids together. So this is icosahedron.
That's just one. Not that a similar solid.
And the next generation of maths is about probability and uncertainty. And so this is a triconjugal, which is based on 5-fold symmetry. So which is the basis of the Penrose quasi-periodic symmetry. So you can take elements of this and repeat it into space to infinity without ever repeating itself. So, and they're now using quasi-periodic symmetry to build materials which don't have any fault lines or transfer energy in very different ways.
So does that mean if you put that inside like for example, a mirror box, it would just basically be an example of another.
You could, yeah, we'd make something very cool. You're
That
absolutely
would be
right.
class.
So that's probably so. And the ones at the end here are maybe slightly different because the next thing I did, I was lucky enough to get permission to be a collector at the Sutton Gallery, and I wanted to make something about uncertainty that expanded. So there wasn't room here to make it, but this made, and I did really like cables. But essentially, these are designed using a glass which changes colour in different lights. It rejects UV from a fluorescent. And that's how I became an electrician, because I created an exhibition and I couldn't get anybody to help me do the lights. So, can you see how that changes?
Yes.
So
Oh, it's kind of like the natural fluorescence of certain lights.
exactly, yeah. So it's, it's very similar to that. So it's got something called, it's got a rare earth called neodymium in it, which rejects particular wavelengths of light. So these are made, because there are 20 of these altogether, and they pack together just using steel bars and gravity and tension to create a stellated dodecahedron. And in order to get that precision, I needed to learn how to cast from a 3D print. So
That's really horrible, isn't it?
it's horrible, yeah. So
I remember doing that.
So
It's awful.
yeah. So it's really
High some
resistance.
resistance in
I was just on a mission. So that allowed me to make. I created the object on the computer. Okay, on the computer, and then 3D printed it. Yeah. Isn't that weird?
Because there's certain gemstones you can do that with and take them out in the sunlight. That's different colours, class. I shoot that.
Practically.
No, I like this. This is like more like the scientific part of